So here is a story almost nobody tells correctly. Back in the 80s, one man helped invent the actual math that keeps the internet secure. The cryptography behind your bank login, your private messages, all of it. He won computing's version of the Nobel Prize for that work. And then, decades later, he built a blockchain that physically cannot fork, a ledger that can't quietly rewrite its own history. For years, people called it a brilliant ghost town, gorgeous technology, and nobody home. And then 2026 rolled around, and suddenly Google, Coinbase, and a whole swarm of AI agents started using it to pay each other. So, let's talk about Algorand. So let's start with the man himself, Silvio Micali. And look, if you only remember one thing about him, make it this. In 2012, he won the Turing Award, which really is the closest thing computer science has to a Nobel Prize. He shared it with Shafi Goldwasser, and here's the kicker. They didn't win it for cryptocurrency. They won it for basically founding modern cryptography itself, the zero-knowledge proofs and probabilistic encryption that quietly secure the whole web. This is a guy who'd been a professor at MIT since the 80s. Now here's the detail that gives me chills. Way back in 1999, Micali co-invented something called a verifiable random function, a VRF. Hold on to that, because 18 years later, that exact invention would become the beating heart of his blockchain. He built the tool first, then built the company around it. So why did he even bother? Well, he looked at Bitcoin and Ethereum and saw three things he just couldn't live with. The enormous energy waste, the way a handful of mining pools quietly centralize power, and worst of all, the forking problem. His own words were something like, "Every time I see my transaction land in a block, I worry the block might just disappear." And honestly, if that makes a world-class cryptographer nervous, imagine how a bank feels. So in 2017, he founded Algorand, a name that's simply algorithm plus random, spun it straight out of MIT, and by June of 2019, the network was live. Okay, so how do you actually build a blockchain that can't fork? This is where it gets clever, and I promise to keep it human. Algorand runs on something called pure proof of stake. And the first beautiful part is that your tokens never leave your wallet. No lockup, no penalties, nothing. Your algo just sits with you while it helps secure the network. Now, remember that VRF from a minute ago? Here's the analogy I love. Picture a nationwide lottery where everyone already holds scratch tickets, and the more algo you hold, the more tickets you've got. Every few seconds the lottery runs. But here's the twist. You scratch your own ticket privately, at home, and a piece of unbreakable math instantly tells you whether you won. Nobody announces it. So if you won the right to build the next block, you step forward, do your one job, and show a mathematical receipt proving it really was you. And think about why that's so hard to attack. You can't bribe or knock offline a validator you can't even see coming. And by the time anyone figures out who they were, they're already done, and a fresh set of winners has taken over. That's how Algorand reaches final, no take-back settlement in under 3 seconds, with no forks, ever. Compare that to Bitcoin, where you wait for confirmations precisely because the chain can technically reshuffle. And then there's the part that feels like science fiction. Algorand was one of the first networks to run real quantum-resistant transactions on a live public chain, using a signature system called Falcon. So when quantum computers eventually arrive, this chain is already wearing armor. Google's own quantum researchers even singled it out as one of the most prepared chains out there. So for years, the big knock on Algorand was, cool tech, but what's actually using it? Let me answer that, because the list got surprisingly long. Take Lofty. They put American rental houses onto Algorand as $50 slices, so regular people can own a piece of a property and collect rent every single day. That platform has pushed past $99 million in value and paid out millions in real rent. Then there's Exodus, a company listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They became the first U.S. public company to put a representation of their own stock onto a public blockchain. And they chose Algorand to do it first, before Solana, before Ethereum. That ordering matters. On the money side, Circle's USDC has been native here since 2020, and a Dutch firm called Quantos launched fully regulated, European-approved euro and dollar stablecoins right on Algorand. But the stickiest stuff? It's in Italy. The Bank of Italy picked Algorand's public chain for digital financial guarantees across more than 30 institutions. And Italy's giant copyright society put over 4 million rights records on it. And here's a quiet win that answers that old centralization worry head on. When Algorand switched on staking rewards in 2025, the foundation's own share of the network dropped from roughly 2/3 down to about a fifth in just a few months, while the number of independent validators basically doubled. Or, as one of Lofty's founders put it, transactions settle with finality in 3 or 4 seconds, very much like what people are already used to in the Web 2 world. Now, I promised you the real picture, not a sales pitch. So let's talk about the hard parts, honestly, because that's how trust actually works. First, that ghost chain reputation wasn't totally unfair. The money locked into Algorand's apps, its DeFi activity, has stayed pretty small, tens of millions, while the big rivals count theirs in the billions. The foundation's response here is interesting, though. They actually published research arguing that this metric is easy to game and doesn't tell you much, and that they'd rather be judged on real-world use. You can agree with that or not, but at least it's an honest argument, not denial. Second, they lost a marquee partner. FIFA, yes, the soccer organization, originally built on Algorand. And then in 2025, it moved its collectibles platform over to its own Ethereum-style chain. That one stings, and it's only fair to say it out loud. Although, the partner that actually matters for payments, Circle's USDC, never left. And third, this has genuinely been a tough stretch as a business. In March of 2026, the foundation cut about a quarter of its staff, citing a rough crypto market and a need to refocus. But their CEO, Stacey Warden, has been refreshingly blunt about the whole journey. She once said, "I think I have the best product, and it's just not well understood, not well appreciated, and not well known." And that's exactly the gap that 2026 is finally starting to close. So here's where the whole story turns, and it turns hard. Remember how this chain was built for a future that hadn't quite arrived? Well, the future showed up, and it's wearing the face of AI agents. In early 2026, Algorand went fully live with something called X402, a payment standard it built together with Coinbase. And the idea is wild, but really simple. It lets an AI agent pay for things entirely on its own. Your assistant needs some data? It just pays a few cents for that API call automatically, machine to machine, settled on Algorand in seconds. And Algorand isn't alone on this bet. Google rolled out its own agent payment standard with more than 60 partners, names like MasterCard and PayPal. And Algorand is one of the chains plugged right into it. Meanwhile, the regulated world started showing up too. In March of 2026, US regulators classified Algorand's token as a commodity, grouping it right alongside Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now, to be crystal clear, that does not mean an ETF exists yet, but it absolutely opens that door. A major Swiss bank, PostFinance, added Algorand. Revolut switched on Algorand staking for around 70 million users, and the foundation folded its 2 separate organizations into a single US company so it can move faster. So that ghost town everyone wrote off, it suddenly has Google, Coinbase, real banks, and a whole swarm of AI agents moving in. So step back with me for just a second. What Algorand really is a bet that got placed a little too early. A Turing Award winner built settlement infrastructure that was fast, final, green, and quantum ready, years before the world had an obvious use for all of it. The ghost chain years were real. The lost partners were real, and I won't pretend otherwise. But here's the thing about being early. Eventually, the world catches up. And in 2026, with AI agents suddenly needing a way to pay each other instantly and without trusting a middleman, you can see exactly why a chain that settles in 3 seconds and never forks starts to look less like a museum piece and a lot more like a head start. So here's one real thing you can actually do with this. If you're a developer, this is the fun part. You can grab Algorand's free toolkit and build a pay-per-use API that AI agents can use today through X402. And if you're just here to learn, go explore how Algorand's staking and governance actually work. It's one of the friendliest ways to feel how proof of stake really clicks. If this finally made Algorand make sense, subscribe, and I'll keep them coming. Thanks for watching.